All right. Let's grab our seats. We're going to get right into our next panel. And it's an exciting one. It's on agriculture. Thank you all. All right. So throughout the UN Climate Action Summit last week, the topic of natural-based solutions or natural climate solutions was mentioned heavily. It was actually an entire track. And this includes things like urban forestry and kelp farming and urban farming and other ways for us to begin mitigating the emissions in the agricultural sector as well. One of my favorite ideas for us solutions that we've developed over the years is what's called fleet farming. This program started here in Orlando as an urban agricultural initiative with a goal of converting neighborhoods into agrihoods and transforming parts of our cities into an edible oasis. We have millions of acres of lawns in this country. It's actually the most farmed crop in the US is the lawn, and it uses a vast majority of our water. And so what fleet farming has tried to do is reimagine what that looks like and create a hyper-local food system that's growing, harvesting, consuming all of this produce within just a few miles of where it's grown. These are the types of innovative solutions that we need to see more to address the climate crisis. And our next panel will talk about farm to atmosphere, visions of zero hunger and climate action. I'm going to introduce our moderator, Jack Beuttell, who's the co-founder of Kunoa, a vertically integrated Hawaii beef company. Jack was raised in Florida, where his family began farming citrus in the 1960s. After 7 years in the real estate private equity space, Jack earned an MBA and Masters of Environmental Management from Duke University, where he was awarded the Case Seed Prize in Social Entrepreneurship and a fellowship sponsorship by Burt's Bees. Jack consulted impact investors before co-founding Kunoa, and in 2017, he was named the HVCA's Ag Entrepreneur of the Year, and Kunoa was named Best New Business by Pacific Edge magazine. Jack relocated to Florida in 2019, welcome back, taking a position as COO for Indrio Brands, a holding company with assets in the citrus arena. So let's welcome Jack, who's going to welcome our panelist up. Thank you, Jack.
Good morning, folks. All right, welcome. Actually, let's go ahead and get the panelists up here on the stage because we're going to dive right in here in a few moments. We've got Lee Perry. We've got Maggie Manas. Nailed it. We've got Ernie, Shea, and Mamtamera. Okay, welcome. So as they find their seats, I'm just going to spend a few moments prefacing this panel. First, I just want to say thanks again for having me and having this panel. Also want to say thank you very specifically to the Volo Foundation, which have been partners and supporters of Kunoa over the last 5 years in Hawaii. It's a privilege to be here. So I'm an entrepreneur and a business person, and I feel a little bit like a fish out of water in a room full of scientists and policy experts, but there's a role for all of us, right? I actually had to take a day of vacation. I was telling Maggie a few minutes ago, I had to take a day of vacation to come to this climate conference, but it's that important that we meet for things like this. So we're here today to talk about farm to atmosphere and the intersections between food, agriculture, climate, and hunger and poverty. And there's a lot in there. And if you think about the food and agriculture system, it touches on a lot of these other topics that are shown in your program with the little icons. Clean water, biodiversity, jobs and economy. Agriculture is a major fulcrum for change. And I realized that several years ago. I was coming out of a career in real estate investment. I was running sustainability programs for a company doing LEED certifications and Energy Star labeling. And I was really not satisfied, so I decided to make a change. I wanted to reconnect with my family's ag history. And again, I realized that ag is this major focal point to either do damage or create regeneration. So I made a change intentionally in 2010 to shift gears. Now, I'm married to a psychologist, and let me tell you, it's lots of fun getting psychoanalyzed, every day, every week at home. My wife is wonderful. One of the things that she helps me do is shift my perspective on things when I get discouraged. And we've heard already today from Chris and others how we're already shifting our perspective from this message of despair. Yes, we know there's a climate crisis out there. We know we're threatened by climate. That is the fact. And yet, we've got to find a way to change the way we view that, to change the way we approach that question. One of the sort of subsets to that question is this false duality of ag versus environment. You know, ag is the devil, and farmers and ranchers are anathema to environmentalists. Well, that's not really true, and we're going to explore some of those questions today with our panelists. As for me, I was actually a vegetarian for 10 years as a kid. Made that decision on my own volition. And then 5 years ago, I started a meat company. So that's kind of nuts, right? But what I experienced was a major shift in my perspective. And I just want to offer a quick story along those lines before we dive into the questions for the panelists. So after I left real estate, the real estate sector, I applied to graduate school and I went to work on a ranch in Colorado. And I was making $200 a month, working 6 days a week. And one day we were riding herd, moving cattle from one paddock to another, 90,000 acre ranch, amazing landscape. And as we pushed the cattle along this fence line, I noticed a very stark contrast between the ranch side and the south side of the fence, which was managed by the state of Colorado. The ranch side was green, and it had tall, vibrant plants, and the state side was basically a dead landscape. You had silver, lignified plants, no wildlife, no birds. On the ranch side, you had very little spacing between the plants. In other words, not a whole lot of exposed soil. On the state side, you had a lot of exposed soil to the atmosphere. On the ranch side, we had cattle. And on the state side, there was no cattle. And what I realized then was that cattle, if managed properly, can be used as a tool to regenerate landscapes, to pull carbon out of the atmosphere and build soil. Now, I'm not here today to convince you to be meat eaters or that cattle are good for the environment, but my point in sharing this story is simply that I exposed myself to some new ways of thinking, to some new questions, and I experienced an explosive idea that changed the trajectory of my career. And I think that's what the opportunity is that we have this morning. There are a lot of interesting and diverse perspectives in the room, and I encourage you all, particularly the young people, to open your hearts and your minds and interact with these new challenging ideas, get into some of these difficult conversations, and figure out where your niche is in this movement. I am hopeful that we're going to create some interest in food and agriculture because we're really passionate about this stuff, and it's really important for the climate movement as we move forward. So the last thing I want to say before I open it up for intros to the panelists is we're going to have some time for questions at the end. If you do have questions and you don't feel comfortable asking them in front of the audience, I'm going to give you my cell phone right now so you can text me your questions. This is an idea from Dr. Cynthia, I think. Dr. Cheryl, thank you. Earlier on in the morning. And so here's my phone number. Take it down if you want to text me a question. It's 808, that's a Hawaii area code, 808-651-3171. Just shoot me a text, and I'll kind of leaf through those, and that's how we'll close out the session. So we've got an hour, maybe 55 minutes left. Let's get going. I'd like to allow our panelists to introduce themselves. We'll just go down the line, 2 minutes per person, and then we're going to start with some of the questions. So Ernie, take it away.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Is the mic on?
Other way.
Yeah.
Hit it one more time.
How about now? Is that better? Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to be with you today. Thank you for putting agriculture on the main stage, because as Jack just said, this is a huge landscape that has a tremendous opportunity to deliver solutions, not just to the climate crisis, but to the broader need to achieve the sustainable development goals that the world is pursuing. I have the great good fortune of working for a national not-for-profit that is a farmer-led organization that is working across the country to help farmers lend their voice to solving the climate crisis. And we are finding a tremendous level of interest on the part of the agricultural community to step up, to transform their operations so that we're actually redefining the core function of agriculture as we go forward through the 21st century. When people think of agriculture, they oftentimes think of it as a place where we produce food and fiber, which obviously it is. But it's also a landscape that can filter and store water. It's a landscape that can sink greenhouse gas emissions and store carbon in the soil and solve part of our climate challenges. It's a landscape that creates and enhances and maintains biodiversity. And it's a landscape that produces air through photosynthesis. So what we're finding is that the agricultural community is realizing that they have been miscommunicating their core functions as food providers. And while they will always do that, they also are delivering high-value ecosystem services that the world wants and needs. So that's the business that we're in. And right here in Florida, we have probably the most progressive group of agricultural leaders across the entire country that have stepped up and said it's time for agriculture to show up and deliver climate solutions. And it's led by a group of farmers, ranchers, forest landowners that have created a mid-century vision for agriculture transforming itself and delivering these critically needed sustainable solutions. And I'm happy to be here to talk a little bit more about that as we go forward. So thank you, Jack.
Thanks, Ernie. Lee.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Lee Perry, and I'm the Chief Operations Officer of Ideas for Us, and I served as the Director of Fleet Farming for several years. Special thank you to Volo Foundation because, events like these are so important to bring brilliant minds together in order to have these discussions that will create change and vibrate through our communities. Otherwise, if we don't talk about it, then nothing will change. So for the speakers and for the UCF staff members and team and to my fellow panelists, it's so important that we're all here today, and I just thank you so much for your time. But most particularly, a thank you to the young people who are probably balancing school and work, and yet you still find it important for you to be here, even though you could be like watching Netflix in your dorm and being completely apathetic. It is so important for you to show the world through your Instagram and social media that you're here and that you care, because you don't know who you'll inspire to do the same. So thank you for being here as well. A little bit about me. My name is Lee Perry again, and Ideas for Us is a really amazing program that started right here on campus with the president of our board. I don't know if you guys know him. His name is Chris Castro. He was one of those students that couldn't just hang out in his dorm and do nothing. He saw a lot of groups and clubs not talking to each other, but still trying to push for great changes on their campus. And so he decided to have a monthly meeting to bring all of these groups, environmental groups, together to have discussions on how they can create change. And that quickly grew into different campuses, and then eventually into the heart of Orlando, where still for 11 years we've been having these hive meetings, is what we call them, the Ideas Hive. I just had one last night, so I'm a little sleepy. And we bring all these brilliant minds together, and we talk about environmental challenges with hopes of mobilizing different generations together every single month to do action projects, environmental hands-on action projects in energy, water, food, waste, and ecology. And what's particularly special about this is that we learned very quickly that by doing so, you can build enterprises like fleet farming that can sustain staff if you create revenue streams around them. So in 2014, we got in a room and we talked about all of the environmental challenges of the agriculture industry. And Chris Castro and many volunteers from this group got on their bikes and on their skateboard, gnarly, and started transforming underutilized lawns in order to create an urban agriculture program right in the heart of their community. And here we are, about 4 years later, we have a staff of 12 people, and we're growing in different communities, including those that are underserved in West Orlando, where the average annual income is $15,000 a year. So that's us in a nutshell.
Hi, everyone. Maggie Manas. Thank you for being here. And thank you for having me. I have the privilege of working for Environmental Defense Fund. We're an international nonprofit environmental organization. And our mission is to bring science and economics to develop solutions to some of the biggest environmental challenges that the world faces. That, of course, includes climate change. It also includes oceans. We have a health program and our ecosystems program where I work, which is focused on how do we get working lands to contribute to environmental solutions instead of degrading ecosystems. I've been at EDF for 8 years. I feel really fortunate to be at that great organization. And my work focuses on large-scale mainstream agriculture across the country, but also in North Carolina where I live. And we work to shift that agricultural system to contribute to climate solutions, as well as providing better water quality, habitat for species, good use of water quantity. And so we're providing, as Ernie said, healthy ecosystems as well as the food that we all need to survive. I think I'll leave it there. The only other thing I want to say in my intro is any students in the room, if you want to talk to me, feel free, come up to me at lunch. No question is a bad question, so I'm happy to chat with anybody afterwards.
Hello. Hi, everyone. My name is Mamta Mehra, and I'm representing here the project Drawdown, which you have heard about, how that Drawdown, Georgia project is going over there. So what is Project Drawdown? Project Drawdown is a nonprofit organization, which is a coalition of researchers, scholars, scientists, advisors, entrepreneurs, students, effectively everyone across the globe who are working on 100 substantive solutions to global warming to achieve Drawdown. Now the question is, what is Drawdown? So Drawdown is a point in time when the atmospheric carbon dioxide starts declining on a year-to-year basis. Project Drawdown is about hope and opportunities in the era of climate change. Climate change is happening. It's a fact. Everybody is now accepting that. What can we do? There are different sectors. There's electricity sectors, transportations, building, but there are other sectors which have not given their due rights. If you talk about the potential and the opportunities they have, for example, food, for example, land, for example, women and girls. Project Drawdown have also identified solutions under these sectors, and they have shown that our results, when we have ranked all 100 solutions based on their climate potentials in the time period 2020 to 2050, 8 out of our top 20 solutions comes from food sector. Imagine, this is such a new and interesting fact for us. Similarly, land has 4 out of top 20 solutions. However, the disparity is that though these sectors have such an important role to play in the context of climate change mitigation as well as adaptations, the kind of financing which is required to uplift these solutions is not there. As per the WRI 2018 report, only 3% of the total financing for that year, which went for the climate programs in general, is only for the land. It was only 3% out of 100% of the total finance. However, the recent 2019 IPCC report just a month back shows that these sectors have close to a quarter, like 25% opportunities are presenting as a solutions to climate change reversal and mitigation. So we at Project Drawdown are now working, moving ahead. Like, you know about these solutions. These are nothing new. These are the solutions across us. These are the solutions, you see around you in different regions, in different sectors. The point which is now focusing is that how we can implement those solutions so that we can really see the impact, and whether it is a target for 1.5 or 2 degrees Celsius, irrespective of that, there are other important issues about resource degradation. There are important issues about poverty. There are important issues about food security. So all of these drawdown solutions talking about agriculture and land, they have a lot of cascading benefits, which is a lot, socioeconomic angle to that. So these solutions are important, and I welcome you all to join hands and let's work to envision a drawdown world in future. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for those introductions. Okay, we've got a list of questions here. What I want to do is, I want to explore the spatial differences that we have represented on the panel. So I want to start at home, Orlando, and look at some of the micro solutions that we've developed here in Orlando, starting with Lee, and then we'll zoom back out to the global scale. So Lee, if you can help us understand with your work in local carbon tracking and integrated pest management techniques, can you talk about some of the work that fleet farming is doing, both from a bottom line perspective and the impact on the communities?
Mm-hmm. I think the best way to answer this question is to compare it to the current agricultural system. So I'm sorry, you wanted to go small, but I need to go up to go small. So right now, our grocery stores are stocked with tons of food, a surplus of food, much of which 40 to 60% is ending up in the landfill. But all of this produce at every Publix and Aldi and Fresh Farm and Earth Fare and Sprouts, and I can keep going for days. All of this surplus of food is coming from monoculture farms that are being treated with tons of pesticides and fertilizers. That is a completely unsustainable system where migrant farmers that are making less than $15,000 a year are being exposed to these pesticides and are either dying from illnesses that are correlated to that or dying from extreme heat conditions. Not to mention just the inhumanity of the jobs themselves, where they have to wear diapers because they get paid by the pound and they don't want to waste any time going to the bathroom or taking a drink of water. So that in and of itself directly ties into the distribution, which the average plate of food travels 1,500 miles from farm to plate, not to mention all of the other steps along the distribution, even you getting into your car to go to the grocery store, or even Amazon shipping it to your door, right? So we have all of these different things that are leading into this really unsustainable system. With fleet farming, we saw these lawns everywhere, completely underutilized resources, which really people don't like their lawns on average. Cutting your grass takes a lot of your time, and your time is so valuable. And also, every time you push your lawnmower, you're expelling 11 times more CO2 into the atmosphere because of the inefficient technology that goes into landscaping. And yet, if you drive by your lawns and you look at them as an opportunity, and it could be a community asset, then you can create a local food movement right in your own front or backyard. And so that's what the Ideas Hive talked about, which brought these different individuals together to create this change. And so on a local scale, we noticed that it's not just about creating a billboard of health and wellness on these front lawns and creating outdoor classrooms to bring people to the process of growing food. We also noticed that it's a community asset in so many other ways. People are actually going outside. They're actually having relationships with the land. The biodiversity in these communities is increasing, where we're seeing bugs that we haven't seen year after year coming back into these local communities. And then different birds are starting to form nests in these communities at an increasing rate, and we're taking note of that. That's all tied into a system. I think it's very difficult because when I go to conferences like this, climate change is kind of segmented in different forms. Energy's over here, water's over here, and then food is over here. But it's all connected. And on a local scale, you can make your entire community healthier if you start to utilize this land to create jobs by selling the local food, by getting your neighbors to talk to each other and to rebuild that relationship with human beings and nature.
Thank you. I love that vision of holistic practices, holistic thinking, integrating all those things together. I think that's really what today's about, is exploring those multiple connections. So let's zoom up one level from the municipal kind of community neighborhood level. And Ernie, if you can help us understand some of the work that you guys are doing in the state of Florida with farmers and ranchers and foresters. You've got a vision that these participants are going to be at the forefront of the climate movement by 2030. And this is just a really interesting idea that these guys, ag versus environment. These are the ag people, and these ag people are going to be at the forefront. Help us understand how that comes to pass.
So Florida is a very special state from an agricultural standpoint and many other perspectives. You are one of the primary production platforms for fresh fruits and vegetables in the country, I think second to California. You've got 20 million people here, but you're supporting an entire national population of, 300 million. We need to maximize and be as efficient as possible in terms of how we use the land, because we're not just using the land to feed people here in Florida, but nationally and even globally. And perspective is important in this climate conversation, because the reality is we are growing. Someone told me that Florida, I've been in Ohio yesterday, that Florida is growing at the rate of 1,000 people a day. That's an amazing statistic. But think of the world. The world population is going to increase to 10 billion people by the year 2050 or somewhere around there. That population base is going on to enjoy the same quality of life that we sometimes take for granted. And healthy, wholesome food is a big part of that. So we need agricultural production platforms to be as efficient as possible, to utilize all of the tools in the toolbox so that we're producing healthy food in an environmentally safe and responsible way. And at the same time, we can deliver other good, high priority solutions from the land. We can sequester greenhouse gases in the soil through the farming practices that minimize plowing, that utilize cover crops, that utilize manure from animal agriculture. There's ways to farm smart, and that's what's happening here in Florida. They name themselves the Florida Climate Smart Agriculture Work Group because they're being very deliberate and very smart, and they're grounded in science, and they're grounded in the outcomes of feeding people, maintaining healthy diets, and improving Florida's environment along with the climate. There are significant challenges resulting from agricultural activities in the state, no doubt about it. We don't want to sweep those under the rug. The nutrient loadings that are coming from agricultural operations are causing significant water quality concerns and algae blooms. Those are not sustainable farming systems and practices, and that's what we're setting out to modify and correct. So my, I think, close would be to say it's not either or. It's not small versus large. It's not one system over another. To feed 10 billion people in a sustainable way, we need local food production. We need large landscape scale production like you are very good at here in Florida. We just need to do it the right way so we benefit people and the climate.
All right, thank you, Ernie. So Maggie, we'll move to you. Ernie just shared with us about some of the things that Florida farmer ranchers and foresters are doing. What are the incentives that folks like this have on a local, regional, national landscape to get involved and actually align with climate change, or the solutions to climate change, rather?
Absolutely. And I thought Dr. Shepard's talk set this conversation up really well, where he landed on the impacts of some of these devastating hurricanes that we've had on food production. Because America's farmers, ranchers, and foresters are really at the forefront of the effects of climate change. Many regions of this country are experiencing major disruptions that harm agricultural production as well as communities and ecosystems, from major flooding in agricultural regions of the Midwest and Southeast to fires and drought in the West. And even aside from those major disasters, even the increasing variability that we see is really damaging to agriculture because farmers depend on consistent, predictable weather patterns to grow their crops. And when those things are disrupted, that disrupts not only the production in our food supply, but also their livelihoods. As we've noted, agricultural production is also a source of greenhouse gas emissions and is a major source of two gases that are much more potent than carbon dioxide. So 35% of US methane emissions come from agriculture, and 75% of US nitrous oxide emissions come from agriculture. I want to stop and think about that for a minute because we worry a lot about the transportation footprint of our food, which is important, but in the broader kind of life cycle emissions of food, it's actually a pretty small slice. And so the methane and nitrous oxide that I was just referring to come from land and animal management and are not associated with energy use or transportation. So this means even if we completely decarbonize our energy system, we still have major sources of highly potent greenhouse gases that have to be addressed. The good news is that we already know how to mitigate many of these emissions, as Ernie said, and forests and farms have the ability to sequester even more carbon. On the farm, we need practices that improve the health of the soil, keep roots in the ground year-round with diverse types of crops, and responsible use of fertilizer and manure. My vision for our farms, ranches, and forests is to provide climate change solutions that support abundant food production, healthy ecosystems, and thriving rural communities. But how do we achieve this vision? So first, we have to recognize that the existing agricultural system has a set of incentives, things that motivate behavior, that push farmers to maximize short-term crop yields at the expense of the environment, and sometimes even their own well-being in the long term. Right now, a farmer that wants to implement these practices, like the farmers that I work with and Ernie works with, are really swimming against the current. So it's possible to do these things, but it really takes these innovators to make it happen. And it shouldn't be that hard. So to change the outcomes of the system, we need to redirect incentives across that whole system to incorporate the value of environmental protection, which is really my passion. And this is not just because it's the right thing to do, but also because it's good business and good public policy. So I'll give you a few quick examples of EDF's work in this space across the agricultural system to realign those incentives to support farmers who are adopting more environmentally friendly practices. So we collaborate with major food companies and retailers, including Walmart and big meat companies, Smithfield and Tyson. And those companies are looking at consumers, millennial moms like me, who, and the students in the room definitely, who want to understand, where did my food come from? How was it made? What are its impacts? And so we collaborate with them to set science-based greenhouse gas reduction goals and then figure out how to make those changes throughout their vast supply chains. Walmart, with EDF's help, has committed to reduce 1 gigaton of emissions from its supply chain, which is equal to the annual emissions of Germany. Those goals also can spark innovation and investment. In Smithfield's case, I worked with them to set the first supply chain greenhouse gas goal in the meat industry. And then they committed to cover 90% of their open manure pits to trap methane gas and generate renewable energy. And now that they've seen the value of those investments, it's like a switch has flipped. So they've gone even further to invest in solar and wind. Now, I'm not going to lie, there's still problems with these forms of production. That's a major reason why EDF doesn't accept any money from our corporate partners. So at the same time that we work with them to try to improve them, we can also hold them accountable when they're not doing the right thing. We also work with the financial institutions that serve agriculture, like insurers and banks, to accurately measure the financial value of conservation practices and then incorporate that value into financial products offered to farmers. And last, we're collaborating with major farmer organizations, such as the National Corn Growers Association, to develop agriculture and climate policy solutions that farmers and their legislators will want to support. EDF is driving towards federal climate policy. We know that this is needed. And we also have done the legislative math, and we know that we need some senators who represent ag states to support a bill for it to pass. So we are building those networks now and trying to figure out how farmers can see their own future in a country that has federal climate policy and how they can benefit from it as it will benefit us all. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Maggie. Yeah, let's give her a round of applause. That's some good news. That's some good news. Okay, Mamta, your organization, Project Drawdown, you mentioned this in your opening comments, has demonstrated that 8 out of the top 20 solutions to global warming come from food and ag. Assuming we can get the policy in place and the incentives aligned, what do some of these activities look like? What are some of the solutions? And what do they look like in real life? And help us explore that on a practical level, how it affects hunger and poverty eradication.
Sure. So as I've said, that these solutions are nothing new. They are the existing solutions. What Project Drawdown has done is that they have literally identified solutions on some criteria, solutions having climate impact, solutions which are financially viable, solutions where there are data available to do the financial and climate modeling as a starting point, because we have to do quantification and to do that for a global scale modeling, we need a good amount of peer-reviewed data. And these are solutions, it's nothing that like all of them have 100% of the positivity. There are some negative externalities as well. But if the positive outcomes are higher than the negative one, we have considered those sets of solutions from different sectors and try to do a mapping, measurement, and modeling. And so that is a little bit of background on how we have arrived to those solutions, which are at present global. But though the focus largely was on climate, but as I've told you that we are now also making an effort that these solutions have other impact, which is beyond climate. They are important from our nature perspective. They are important from our socioeconomic benefit. So to answer that, I will present these solutions in 3 subsectors. The first one is education and girls. So here we have 2 solutions. One is women and education and right to education for all. It has been seen and widely documented that women with more years of education have fewer and healthier children. And together, if you provide them, the right to have family planning, voluntary family planning, they will have children by choice and not by, just out as a consequence. So these solutions together plays a very important role in population control. This is one side of the story. Then this other angle is about food demand side. In here we have 2 solutions, which is about reducing food waste and plant-rich diet. Globally, at present, 30 to 40% of the food we produce on an annual basis gets wasted from production to consumption. Imagine how much resources in turn gets wasted, whether it is about water, whether it is about nutrient, labor, land, etc. And see the irony that one side we globally are wasting so much of the food, and on the other side we have malnutrition, we have poverty, and we have hunger-related issues in many parts of the world. So if we, in a way, there are measures you can improve the efficiency and reduces the loss across that stages, we will be in a position that we don't have to, in future, deforest our primary ecosystem to produce more food, because we really don't need more food. What we need is that we, at one point, reduce the food weight, and on the other side, produce food more sustainably on the existing cropland and the grassland. And if we adopt plant-rich diet, together these solutions are also important to project our future global food demand. So population control, reducing food wastage, adopting plant-rich diet are the solutions which talk about how you can reduce or control our food demand in future, while the food supply side solutions talk about how you can produce food more sustainably on croplands and grassland. Here I can talk about regenerative agriculture. And in one of the earlier presentation, that was the case from India, that farmers are forced to burn the crop residues on the field, and they don't have any choice. Well, they do have. It's just that they need to be aware, and we need right policies and regulatory mechanisms so that they should not be just forced to burn those crop residues and allow our environment to be polluted. So regenerative agriculture practices are about keeping your soil covered, keeping those crop residues back into the soils, allowing minimal or no disturbance to the soil no-till mechanism, adopting crop diversifications, and on top of that, because you might feel that these are conservation agriculture. Yes, they are. But regenerative agriculture is one step ahead, where we're talking about having the conservation agriculture principles in place, but along with that, adopting agroecological principles, adopting composting, adopting organic agriculture and manuring. So making those basically moving away from the synthetic and pest chemicals to more and more organic, manure, and composting way of food production. We also have solutions like Maggie pointed about methane, which is an important source from the agriculture side, and rice, the paddy, is one of the contributor, because you keep, the conventional way of rice production is keeping the field flooded. But there are ways which scientists have, in last 3 decades have shown that you can produce your rice. You don't have to literally flood your field. There are ways of alternate wetting, drying. There are ways of mid-season drainage and all that. So if you manage the way you are watering your fields, if you manage the way you are applying the nutrient, also manage the way you are cultivating your field, because the more you till your land, expose your land, the more carbon is coming into the atmosphere. And more, another angle is about the cultivar also, because we need right kind of germplasm to be in a position to grow in that less saturated conditions. And there we need aerobic cultivars for rice production. These solutions, though sounds global, but many of them are very much adopted by the small-scale farm holders, whether women and male. Talking about the system of rice intensification, a practice which is very well adopted by small farm holders and have shown that you can gain, close to our meta-analysis has shown that 30 to 35% of the yield gain compared to the conventional rice cultivation. So you can imagine that these solutions has a climate angle, but they also in turns giving you higher yield. You are able to produce more food, more sustainably from the same piece of land, and you are also getting good return out of that. Similarly, the grassland-based solutions, we promote silvopasture, we promote managed grazing, which is about silvopasture is about integrating trees into the grazing systems, because a lot of time and we focus on avoiding emissions, solutions and measures so that we can reduce the emissions into the atmosphere. But we should not forget that we have to also look for solutions where we can capture, sequester this carbon back into the soil, back into the biomass through a process which we all know as the photosynthesis. So these carbon sequestration potential of these solutions are very important. Trees are very important, whether we grow it in our backyard, urban farming and everywhere. So these principles, I believe, are universal principles which you can apply at the local level, regional level, state level, or at the global level. Also there are other solutions, nutrient management. I can go on, but if I summed it up, what we feel is that we have to literally think about how we can translate these solutions literally into each and every farm, because then only the goal of drawdown will be achievable. It's not that only we are having some pilot testing here and there. We need global actions. We need global result. For that, we need actions, both collective, individual, at all scales. And that's why we also need a systemic approach. We need people to interact from different sectors. It's because we have seen that what is happening in the agriculture is impacting the transportation, because agriculture from the farm has to be brought to your door. So there is a transportation connection. Also, there are a lot of mechanics required. There is an energy component to that. So we need to bring the dialogue across different sectors, across different, and look this issue from a systemic perspective and come out with the holistic solutions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mamta. Wonderful. All right, folks, quick time check. We've got about 15 minutes left, and I haven't received one text, so my feelings are hurt. I was hoping to make some friends today. So I'm hoping that they're going to start flowing in here. But let me cue off of a couple things that were said there. And I want to stir it up intentionally a little bit. So big versus small, big ag, small ag. I want you to tell me which one's right and which one's wrong, right? I want a simple answer. So, Maggie, we heard you reference Smithfield and Tyson, so get your thoughts ready. But let's start with Lee. You also mentioned that these are two very different forms of agriculture, scales of production. The small scale, literally out your back door, and then the large scale monoculture. So can you help us understand, from your perspective, what is the role of big ag, or to distinguish slightly from that, large-scale field crops, monoculture, et cetera, and the various gradations of that. What's the role of that in our food system?
Well, we obviously can't sustain, like Ernie said, a 10 billion person population without a large-scale farming practice. But I think what urban agriculture and small-scale farming helps to do is put the food and the process of growing right in the faces of the people who are consuming it. Because I think that food waste doesn't just stop at the grocery store and throwing it away. A lot of people throw away food right in their own homes because they don't understand the value in the process, the blood, sweat, tears, and literally people dying to put that food on your plate. But when you see outside the level and the time that it takes just to grow a turnip right on your front lawn, it helps people respect food more, because there's an entire mentality shift that has to happen globally in order for us to shift to larger scale climate solutions. And so what better way to do that than put it right in your face right then and there, and maybe experience after a hurricane. This is a real example. A lot of our farmers here, about between 25 to 100 miles away from central Orlando, a lot of those farmers that had 25 plus acres of farmland after a couple hurricanes a few years ago, they were completely wiped out for months. Family-owned farms that they either lost or went over 75 to 95 days without a single dollar made, because they lost everything with this large-scale farm where the wind had the ability to pick up and completely wipe them out. We were back at the farmers market the very next weekend because the buildings helped slow down the wind, and we were able to still sustain our farmlets, is what we call them, in order to go back to the farmers market. But yet, would we be able to feed the entire city with our small-scale farms? No, absolutely not. So there needs to be a diversified look at agriculture, and yet I think we can't just continue the practices as they currently are. We need to start integrating more sustainable solutions. But another thing that we really need to mention is the economic side of growing food as well. There are barriers to even what we are doing right now. My farmers are making a livable wage, but we do not just sell vegetables. It would be impossible for us to make our margins and to pay our staff selling just vegetables, because our nation completely undervalues the true cost of our food. Tomatoes all year at that price point is unfathomable to me, and the reason why they are able to be sold at that cost is because we are working on the backs of migrant workers who are literally dying in the fields. And yet, because it's so far away from the everyday person, we are not, we're throwing away our tomatoes, sometimes hundreds of pounds at the border that are not being processed into our grocery stores. So to answer your question, we need every type of more sustainable agriculture practices, from small scale to large scale, but we need to shift our entire mentality as a culture and start to respect food more and vote with your dollar at the grocery store.
Awesome. Thank you, Lee. Maggie, if you can riff on this just very briefly, maybe 1 minute, and then I want to fly into some other questions.
Yeah, absolutely. We get this question a lot. Why do we work with big companies? Because when they decide to do the right thing and then figure out the business case to make it possible, they can really rapidly scale environmental solutions. And I hope that applies not just to the environmental solutions, but also to labor, to animal welfare. You know, there are a variety of ways in which the system needs to improve. And so that's why accountability is also really important. And I agree, vote with your dollar, and also vote with your social media. They are watching and listening. They care, especially you students, what you think. So definitely make yourself heard. I've been in a room where McDonald's said, we have to figure out what local means to us. And so it feels counterintuitive, but also it shows that they're listening and they're trying to understand. So I really do encourage that engagement. We have those tools like we never have had before.
Bonus time for Ernie. Go.
So let me be very clear. Climate change is real. Climate change is happening now. climate change is an enormous threat multiplier to everyone in the room because we all eat. And the solutions to climate change need to come from any and every form of production that we have. Whether you're big, whether you're small, whether you're organic, whether you're conventional, whether you're farm to table, it doesn't matter because the changing climatic conditions are going to crush all of us if we don't step up and lead and learn from each other. So we're creating platforms where we're not even worrying about one or the other, but we're networking, bringing small producers together with large producers. Large producers are very efficient and figured out how to do things that are transferable back to smaller operations. Similarly, smaller operators have found unique practices and innovations that can be scaled so we can learn from each other. And to survive, to thrive, to solve the climate crisis, we need to do three things. First, we need to sustainably intensify production because we need to be feeding 10 billion people. Sustainable intensification of production, ag done right. Second, we need to adapt and transform to improve our environmental performance, to improve our resiliency. So when we get these shocky conditions that we heard about this morning, we're better prepared to react, whether it's high temperatures, extreme flooding events. And then third, we need to unlock the full potential of these agricultural landscapes to deliver the solutions we want. And that requires an economic flow of resources back in so that farmers and ranchers and foresters are valued, recognized, and compensated for the investments they're going to make to transform to deliver the outcomes we want. We think that the key to unlocking that is to design a smart ecosystem service payment mechanism where market forces can reward the innovative producers that are doing a good job of filtering the water, of sinking the carbon, of managing the methane emissions from cattle operations, and put a premium out there to encourage them to incur the additional expenses to put these practices on the ground. Now you've got an economic engine behind a movement that is positioned, ready, and able to deliver climate solutions at scale. And that's why we're here in Florida.
Excellent. Thanks, Ernie. So let's shift gears just a little bit. I want to go back to Mamta. Your expertise is more on the research side, but your organization has a very unique role in the movement by virtue of its scope. And your organization has developed some very interesting communication tools. So from where you sit, can you help us understand the importance of communicating the message, crafting the message? And I would assume that most of us in this room are already converts. So what tools can you give us to go out and share that message with our family members, our friends, our coworkers, et cetera?
Sure. I think when 2001 was the case, so I'm taking the story, the narrative we got to hear from our previous executive director, Paul Hawkins. So at that time, the IPCC report and other reports, they all project climate change, crisis and all that, and this is going to happen in future. So kind of this giving as an individual or a layman a depression, okay, what is going to be the future? What will be, the case for our future generation and all that. So at that time, he was thinking about, can we do something? Because at that time, there was nothing was provided to a reader or a layman that what can be done. Though there is a problem, that's true, but what can be done? And that's how this project Drawdown and concept of Drawdown solutions came into existence. And since 2014, we started working on those issues. And you're talking about the tools. So maybe in one of my slides, in 2017, our efforts of 4 years research has shown that there are, as a starting point, and what we are saying is that this is just a global picture, because somewhere you have to start. And when we have started doing the modeling at the global scale, these were the 100 solutions we thought are more available, scalable, financially viable, and have climate potential. And those were documented in a book, 2017, Penguin publication, and it got such a good reviews that it was cited as 2017 New York Times bestseller. So this is one of the tools which nowadays is, every environmentalist who is working on this field is taking it. But the other ways is that we also have a Drawdown Learn platform, where we are engaging with teachers and students that how we can bring the discussions on climate change in our school and in our classrooms, and not only to the science students. It's equally applicable to the art students, to other background students. But sometimes teachers are not in a position to communicate this information in a very simple and easy to understand language. So Project Drawdown is putting a good effort how to bring the scientific, so-called jargon-based information to a very simple and story-based way, and their Drawdown Learn team is doing their job. Moving ahead, we are also working on global research platform. We are building a coalition with different partners in different regions of the world. We have started some seed organizations in Europe. We are also having, a collaboration with Georgia University, Penn State University. The idea is that let's all the people who are working on Drawdown or similar, Drawdown is a nomenclature. I believe that whatever we all are talking about, these are the drawdown solutions. These are the climate corrections, what we need. Let's we all be coming together, because there, in that platform, you will get the research, you will get data, so that if you want to see how those solutions can be implemented in your scale or region, what is going to be the impact. We're also hoping to bring that platform where the philanthropists and the researchers and the practitioners come together, so that sometimes we have a gap that research is there, but the practitioner doesn't know what to do. The philanthropist is there, but he doesn't know where to invest. So let all of the important key stakeholders, the policymakers also, they are also looking for new ideas and new solutions, what can be done. So these are all different initiatives which Project Drawdown is initiating. And we have a website, drawdown.org. Please have a visit over there. And that's it about the communication tools. Yep.
Thank you very much. We got started a little late, so we've got a little time for some audience questions. Still haven't received any text, so that means you guys are ready. Yes, in the back. Yes, ma'am. Oh, somebody else got that text, I guess. Oh, you did.
I have a question for Lee Perry. I was just wondering if you think if there's a role for HOAs in encouraging more urban agriculture. Could we sell the idea of like green branding for HOAs that encourage sustainable lawns and growing your own food in your backyard, do you think?
I get that question all the time. Do you live in an HOA? I'm curious. Does your HOA do things to bring people together, like different types of festivals, like National Night Out and stuff like that? Just curious. Yeah. No, I just asked that because most of the individuals that ask me, they're usually sitting on their board and they're having to fight a fight within their HOA. But we have done business with HOAs where we've built community gardens, and those are the HOAs that are already, like Chris said, quote unquote woke, where they understand the value of bringing their residents together, and ultimately it actually heightens their price point and the value of living within the HOA, because you have this sense of community within there. And so urban agriculture is an asset and looked at as a way to also generate revenue, because they rent out the boxes in order to maintain the oversight of the garden as well. So that's, I have to speak 10 different languages when I'm trying to communicate anything about climate or the environment or urban agriculture. And those languages are different paradigms that I have to speak to. And when you're talking to someone who might not believe in climate change, or someone who might not see the value in urban agriculture, you have to curve it in a way where it might suit their interests, and that's their language. And so with an HOA, look at how aesthetically pleasing their lawns are, right? So beautiful. Urban agriculture can be just as beautiful as that. It can be just as visually pleasing, but also beneficial to the local ecological systems. And that's just kind of the message you have to tell the board when they're deciding upon that.
Okay, we had one there in the back. Yes, ma'am. Yeah, there we go. And then we've got time for one last rapid fire question from the panel.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you to Volo Foundation and for this esteemed panel for speaking truth on these urgent issues. So I agree with everything you have said, and big and small together. There's no one solution. It's everything all at once, all at the same time, which Drawdown helped us do. So my question is this. With 10 billion people about to need resources to live, we cannot do it without political and economic will. So we talk about companies needing to invest, and that investment might mean shrinking profits short term to make so much of a difference long term. How do we do that? How do we incentivize, applaud, celebrate at scale the big ag organizations that could do this without polluting our rivers and streams and air and so on?
Thank you, Maggie, in 1 minute or less.
Okay. As EDF is somewhat of a leading voice in what corporate leadership on sustainability means, we have the ability to help define that. And so we are now making a major push on, corporate leadership doesn't just mean cleaning up your own mess. It still means that, but it also means, speaking the truth and being public and advocating for climate policy. And so we're trying to, we have a group of CEOs that we're engaging in developing climate policy principles and being more outspoken on that. And so we really completely agree. It can't just be about your own supply chain, although that is important, but this is a collective action problem and we need policy to solve it.
Can I just add two very quick points on that? The good news is that things are changing. There is a political will to have. I think in different parts of the world, if you see, India is doing good work on renewable energy sector, so that's showing a path. And also I agree with Lee that you have to use different language, to address to their issue, their concerns. Yep.
It's getting hot in here. Okay. This is the closer, and I want to thank you all. Verizon just batched 25 texts and sent them to me, so good job. And fail on my part, but let me close with this. So this is a question from the audience. Hello, I'm a high school student attending the conference right now from the Ecology Club of school. We as a team would like to participate in any activities that would help correct climate change. What can we do? What should we do? Who should we contact with? So, closer here, panel, if you can address that question, let's say 5 words or less rather than a statement. A couple of words that these students can take home and get busy with. Yeah, go ahead, Ernie.
Thank you, and join the coalition to fight climate change. I think that's the key. We cannot do this alone. Agriculture needs all types of partners. So whether you're a young student, whether you're an academic professional, a business partner, please join the Climate Smart Agriculture Work Group. We'll put you to work.
Excellent. Lee.
Question everything and act. Question everything and do something about it. Plant a tree, do your homework, investigate who's getting money from fossil fuel industries and what kind of impacts the people that you're giving your money have on the planet, and change your behavior at home.
Hi. Here.
Oh, there's someone with a question.
The question, I was the one that made the question.
Excellent.
And,
okay.
So this is my group. We are from the Eco Club in Freedom High School. And everyone says, just go, do stuff, when you're brushing your teeth or whatever, save the water. But I want to know hands-on, what can I do? If you told me next week, go here and we'll help you and we'll do this and that. I want to know who can I contact with, or what website do I have to go and who to talk with so we can actually do something.
Okay, excellent. So really putting it to us there. Good job, high school students.
I'm going to explode if I don't answer that. I'm so sorry to take up your time, but please come and see me after. Ideas for us. We do shoreline restoration projects. We do large-scale tree plantings. We do urban agriculture. We do solar workforce training programs to shut down that barrier to entry for students to get into the solar industry. Contact me. Literally, this month we have 3 different projects going on. Every month we have at least 2 or 3 projects, so yes.
Maggie.
Also, check out Defend Our Future, which is EDF's Youth Climate Action Group.
Awesome.
And if you are ready for a challenge, join Drawdown Eco Challenge.
Okay, challenge set. We've got our work to do here. Lots of work to be done before we reconvene next year. Thank you so much to the panelists. They're going to be here for a couple of hours, so please find them over lunch and ask the rest of those questions. Thank you.